Oh, it's so wonderful to see you again. Come in and unwind. Welcome back to the Celestial Cafe, a podcast for the magical mind.
So come, take a seat. Would you like something sweet? A star drop potion for the soul? Maybe an enchanted eclair as a treat?
I just baked a batch of warm cookies with a dash of moonlight. I wonder what will happen if you take a little bite.
Here is your bewitching beverage. Let each sip melt your worries away. It's time to open your mind. I wonder what magic awaits us today.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Celestial Cafe podcast, a podcast for the magical mind. Hello to my fellow hosts. How's everyone doing?
Greetings.
Hello.
Happy Homestuck Day. I can't believe I just said that.
Doogsley.
My bad.
It's apparently also Kelly Day for Splatoon.
True.
Oh.
Big day.
Hi,
for
Panthera.
us.
Yeah.
Hi.
So welcome in. I hope that you're all doing well. Happy springtime. We're recording this on April 13th. So we're halfway through the month of April, and it's over here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's getting beautiful and sunny. Dukes, I think you said you had 80-degree weather.
Oh my god, it was beautiful out today. So warm, so cozy, and I'm just soaking up the rays, you know?
So I hope y'all are getting out and getting some sunshine, recharging, touching your little toes to the ground, touching grass, as the kids say these days.
Touch grass.
Earthing a little bit, grounding a little bit. So yeah, today we're really excited about this episode. We are doing our Astrology 101 episode. So this is going to be a big ol' one. And it's all four of us here. And yeah, so welcome to the Astrology one. Are y'all excited for this?
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more because I feel like astrology is one of those areas that I've always felt like, I don't know enough to speak on it. But I've done a lot of research lately, so I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I didn't get into astrology until I met you all, until we started the witchy section of Offbeats, and you were all into astrology and tarot. I'm like, I'm not into that, but I want to talk witchcraft with people, and then I got sucked in. So I'm still learning a lot. So I'm excited to see what I pick up from this conversation. Although we have our own, insights on things too. So,
Mm-hmm. And I think that this is just a long time coming for Celestial Cafe. We talk so much about astrology on the full moon episodes, and now it's time to kind of get specific and talk about what exactly the intricacies are in the birth chart. We're going to be talking about the history. We're going to be talking about this is truly a 101 moment where we're just going to dive deep into all the what you gotta know in order for you to pick up that big confusing circle and be able to understand what it's trying to tell you.
Yeah, so I have a general understanding of astrology. I've talked about it before in other episodes, but mine came from starting with tarot and realizing the connections that astrology has to tarot, and then starting to kind of deep dive from there. This is the Celestial Cafe podcast. You can find us at celestialcafe.org. We have our YouTube, our Twitter, and our Instagram, our Discord server if you'd like to join the community and chat. Thank you all to our new patrons recently. Thank you all so much for the support. It's been wonderful. We are going to be potentially expanding our Patreon coming up in the next month or two. Right, Panthera?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're very excited. So I think we're looking at the beginning of June for upgrading the Patreon to the next level tier, where we will be introducing a new witchy book club. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, you want to read along with us to some new material and learn some more and have some really great discussions in our Discord, definitely check that out. And yeah, I hope to see you guys there. I'm excited for that kind of more in-depth discussion with you all.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yes. So, thank you all for the support on the podcast. And we're recording this live today on Twitch. We record episodes live on Twitch occasionally, so you can get the link to that on the website. And I keep dates up there for the next episodes. But this is going to be available in video format on YouTube, or it is also available in audio format on all podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So you can get all the links you need from our website. And I guess we're going to go ahead and jump in, right? Okay, so our first section that we're going to talk about today is what is astrology? And Panthera is going to kind of lead here for a second because we're going to do a little bit of a dipping our toes into the history of astrology.
Oh, I am so nervous. So I wrote like a giant, I did so much research on this, y'all. Like I've been like diving into astrology for the past 2 weeks and the history of it. So I'm just going to keep this pretty brief and try to focus on like the origins and kind of the evolution of it up through to modern day. Basically, astrology was developed in a couple different areas. Well, I guess first, do we want to talk about what astrology is?
Yeah, I have like a one sentence
My bad.
summation, I think, of what exactly astrology is, what it's meant to be, at least as paraphrase as possible, which is astrology is the study of like the correlation between the stars and the planetary bodies and earthly events and earthlings. So it's the, and of course correlation does not equal causation, but it's the reflections, right? The vibrations.
Interpretation, kind of.
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
not. Yeah.
The planets are emitting a specific vibration. We're emitting some specific vibrations. And imagine like all of us are like a blank canvas. And then when we're born, we come out with a very specific vibrational dance canvas of all the different frequencies of the different planets and the signs too, and the houses, all things we're going to be getting into. Then you carry that vibration with you throughout your whole life. And not only do we have them, but specific events have them, locations have them. And it's just sort of, astrology is all about sort of piecing together that, just those correlations between us on this little planet and the big, beautiful sky above us that paints many pictures.
Yeah, the way that I've kind of come to understand or think about astrology is it's just the sky is a mirror. Everything that's happening up there is a reflection of what's happening.
Right?
Yes, very as above, so below. Whatever's happening up there is happening down here. And whatever's happening down here is happening up there. And some people have the insight, intuition, the mind, the knowledge, whatever skills that grant them the ability to understand and see the story being told through the stars and the planets that are moving. Because it's incredibly interpretive. Astrology is like dream interpretation. Yes. It's all symbolic and very flowy. There's no I think that's what makes it so interesting. And also when you do come across, and I think Panthera is going to mention Nostradamus, but when we come across these famous people who are making predictions throughout history that do end up coming true, they're always kind of like in a very vague, strange way, like the 3-headed lion will devour the 6th serpent. It's kind of like Revelation style, right? Very like, but that's because that's the shapes in the sky and the things that are happening in the sky. And this is also like Greco-Roman mythology is based on the planets, so like the planets correspond to gods in old time, which I find fascinating too. So it's a whole fun thing. And then of course there's just the like pop astrology where it's like, I'm a Gemini sun, and that means that I'm really talkative or whatever. Like, yeah.
And yeah,
that's like the lowest end of astrology is the pop astrology,
it's
Yahoo
the tip of the
horoscopes.
iceberg.
Yeah, and especially the like really low effort, like to all fire signs, your ex is going to be calling you this week. Like, and it just feeds upon people's insecurities and fears. But real astrology runs way deeper than that and gives a lot. I call it increases the depth of your story. It gives you a deeper understanding. And the word that I use a lot when I give astrology readings is like, you already know this, but this is validating the experience that I'm sure you've lived.
And that's
letting you know.
The way I always think of it, especially if you know me, I'm really into sim games, life sims, decorating sims, and decorating my own like apartment, my own space. The way I always think of astrology when it pertains to the self is your birth chart is the blueprint of who you are, but you can use that space and decorate it however you want. And that's just it's the foundation, it's the blueprint, and then make of it what you will. You might want to knock down this wall or put in like a divider. But that's what you start with.
And I don't know, the first time I started getting into my own birth chart, it was sort of like, I would definitely relate it to like when I got my ADHD diagnosis and like all my other mental health diagnoses. It was like, oh, I knew this already, but now there's a name for it. And now I can research it more and I can find other people who have the same name and understand how they interact or they work around this. Like they, you know, cope with life while being this. And my birth chart was like, it gave me this intense wave of relief that I'm meant to be like this. It's not something wrong with me. This is just, and that's the same thing when I got the ADHD diagnosis, for example. It's like, this is just how my brain works. And so now I can learn how to work with this. It's just how my brain works that I'm a motor mouth and never shut up because I'm a triple Gemini in the third house, right? Like I'm never going to shut up. And that's okay because that's actually my strength, right? And that's what I find astrology very empowering and very, it helps me with like self-care and
it made me
approaching
feel
life
seen
better
and like understood at first. So it's like, because at first when I first like learned about astrology, I was like, man, like I don't know, I felt like I never really resonated with just like the plain Libra that was given to me. But once you understand that it's more in depth, like there's so many layers to it, and it's not meant to be like a one size fits all, like every person can fit into these 12 zodiac signs. Like that's not how it is. It's so much more like deeper than that. It's so fascinating.
Like there's so many moving parts to a chart, and to only rely upon the sun sign is gonna set a lot of people up for failure. You gotta look. God, which we'll be talking about too. We're gonna be talking about all the basic layers of a birth chart, and whew, yeah, we got a lot of stuff to discuss
so
today.
I guess that's what is astrology.
And it's that reflection. It's the heavenly bodies above us reflecting our silly earthling lives below.
And then it allows us to reflect upon ourselves and move forward in a better way. So, or in not necessarily a better way, just a more self-aware way.
More informed way.
I agree with that.
So shall we jump into the history?
Let's hear it, Panthera.
Yes, let's hear it.
And so for those of you guys who are listening or watching along, I don't have this blog post on yet at the time of this live stream, but it should be out by the time of the episode actually releasing. So I just have to polish off a few things, but all of this is there if you want to be able to reference it in the future. But so let's first start with the origins of astrology. So astrology is actually kind of debated where it originally started, because so many different cultures kind of came up with the similar ideas at the same time. But one of the biggest cultures that is credited with the rise of astrology is Babylon. So there were a ton of astrologers there in early Babylon, and that is where it played such a crucial role in political, religious affairs, and it eventually kind of spread from there to Egypt, Greece, and a lot of these other cultures that really like took it and ran with it. So the Babylonians were particularly skilled at observing the heavens and recording the movement of these celestial bodies. They believed that these movements could be used to predict events on Earth. And this led to many of the developments of basic principles of astrology that we use today, like the zodiac system is credited to them, a system of 12 constellations that are used to represent the positions of the planets and the stars. The concept of planetary hours also comes from them, which if you guys haven't listened yet, check out the magical timing episode with me and Shady. We talk all about planetary timing. And then the Greeks kind of took these concepts and built upon them. one of the most famous Greek astrologers, Ptolemy. He wrote a book called Tetrabiblos, which is still studied today. And this book kind of outlines the principles of astrology and how it can be used to actually predict events. The Greeks also are the ones who developed the natal chart or the birth chart, which we'll be talking about later. So this is essentially kind of like a horoscope, which is like a set prediction of one area, but it's referring to a specific birth person, right? So if that makes sense. So like a horoscope can be about any day, any time. It's not necessarily relating to a person. It's just like the chart for that particular day. And then like predictions are made from it. But a natal chart or a birth chart is specifically tied to a person and their birth time. So we'll be talking about a lot with that later. And then the astrolabe was also invented in ancient Greece, which is a tool that was used to help kind of like determine these because back then, like, we didn't have computers to just type things in. All of this was done mathematically by hand using tools like the astrolabe. So it was a very complex and very mathematical system. If you wanted to be an astrologer, it required a lot of study and a lot of skill.
And I mean, oftentimes a lot of astrologers were astronomers. It was
it was all together. Yes, exactly. And mathematicians. So like a lot of your
back when like alchemy was like alchemy and science were like the same thing.
And you'll notice too that like a lot of these big names like Ptolemy, Aristotle, Pythagorean, right? Like all of these big names are very heavily tied with like mathematics, philosophy, and like astrology and astronomy.
But
like all
mathematics
of it
is how you calculate birth charts.
It's pure.
Exactly.
It's the only math Doogsley likes.
Actually true. I thought about this before. Of course, the only math I connect to is the woo-woo, astro, like celestial, like, of course, it lights up.
That's great. But so the last of these kind of ancient civilizations that I'm going to talk about is ancient Egypt. And ancient Egypt believed that the movements of the stars and planets actually had a direct influence on the lives of individuals and societies as a whole, to the point where they would use astrology to tell them when to plant and harvest their crops for the year, or when to build temples. It basically ruled over their entire civilization. So the ancient Egyptians made the Sothic calendar, which is based on the movement of the stars. And this calendar is an important tool for astrologers in predicting celestial events and understanding the influence of stars on human affairs. And this calendar actually centered around the star Sirius, which I think used to be the North Star. It's not anymore, technically. But so that is where their calendar is based on. They also have their own whole system of astrology, also referred to as Egyptian star lore, which is a whole system that they use to have the placement of the planets in the sky at the time of a person's birth, and using that to provide insights into a person's character or destiny. So very similar to like our modern astrology, they have their own whole system for that. So then let's get to the Middle Ages. So those are kind of the cultures that really like shaped early astrology. And then it started getting picked up kind of throughout all of Europe. It was really big in the Middle East. During the Middle Ages, specifically, the Islamic scholars of Persia were a huge influence on astronomy. This is where we had the first invention of the mechanical astrolabe. So what used to be a physical thing that you would just reference and utilize now is a kind of almost like clockwork construction that can move for you and calculate for you. This is where we had Abu Mashar, who is known as the Prince of Astrologers, who made significant contributions to the field, including the development of techniques for calculating the positions of planets and the use of solar and lunar eclipses to predict events. And he wrote several influential books on astrology that are still referenced today, and you can find a lot of them on Amazon, actually. But so some really big contributions there. This is also when we had one of the most famous astrologers of all time, Nostradamus. So during the European Middle Ages, like in that area during the Middle Ages, we had a heavy use of nobility, royalty, and people purchasing the use of astrological services, basically. So it was very common for a king or a queen on their court to have a astrologer that they would like consult
Just
for
like modern day
all of
with
their
our
decisions.
billionaires
Yeah.
that
We
have
still have
astrologers
that.
ready to go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
That is not
this is where it
stopped.
was huge. Exactly. So, and one of the most famous ones is Nostradamus, who wrote a book called Les Prophéties. I don't know.
Well, that's the sequel to Les Miserables.
Oh yeah.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. That was not a good joke.
So this book contained a series of quatrains, which are essentially like it's a stanza. It's like a 4-line poem, basically, that usually rhymes, and all these are said to be predicting the future. And a lot of people do believe that his predictions have come true, and kind of attribute them to predicting everything from 9/11 to World War II.
I was going to say he had a crazy one in there that was pretty on spot for 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Some definitely look it up if you're interested. So I do have one here, which is the blood of the just will be demanded of London, burnt by the fire in the year 66. The ancient lady will fall from her high place. Many of the same sect will be killed. And they believe that this predicted the London fire, the Great Fire of London, which occurred in 1666. So burnt by the fire in the year 66. They believe that this is a pretty...
Compelling.
I mean, that's kind of crazy.
If you're good at chart interpretation, though, like, and that's the thing is a lot of it would be like prophecy and riddle sounding, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, I see like Libra is really interacting over here heavily with it, and with the way Mars is squaring this, there's clearly something this crazy conflict is going to happen, and it's going to be centered around justice, and justice will finally be delivered. And so it's like you've got these vague like brushstrokes that you're painting. It's not quite vague because it can get quite rather specific, but it's not like America will do this, Europe will do that. You have to look at these giant archetypes and see how they're manifested in reality, which countries take on which roles and things like that. Because I think we all have like a clear visual in our mind when we think of America. That's an archetypical symbol and image of that country versus another country like Italy. There's a different visual and feeling and like right that comes to mind for those. Yeah.
Very cool. So, yeah, I don't know if you guys wanted to, I know, Shady, you know a lot about Nostradamus, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk more about him here.
I have a whole book on all of his.
Interesting.
I have a whole Nostradamus book, but it's one of the like hundreds of books that I've gotten that I'm like, if I have this book, it's like I have this knowledge.
You'll get onto it one day.
You absorb it.
I'll absorb it just by
osmosis.
Yeah.
You're in its aura.
It's definitely maybe a book like that will have to be
Honestly,
on our
a Nostradamus episode would slap. No,
That would
no
be
lie.
I would love to talk about
That would be
Nostradamus.
fun. I would love to
Very
go through like all the
interesting
different prophecies. That would be interesting. But so now we'll go to like the kind of history leading up to modern astrology. And so just to be clear, I am not covering like everything. There's obviously a lot of shit that happens, and I can't also do every single culture all over the globe. But I'm sure that like I didn't do a lot of research on like Eastern astrology, but I'm sure that there is a lot developing over there too. I focused mostly on like Middle Eastern to European side.
I actually feel like Eastern astrology is its whole own
it's kind
section.
of its own whole thing. Yeah, because you got like the
you think about,
Chinese
like, the
zodiac.
Chinese zodiac.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, that needs to be its own whole thing. And I wasn't going to dive into that too this time. But, but so now we'll go up to after the Middle Ages. Astrology continued to evolve and grow. And this is where we get a lot of technological innovations that really, really skyrocketed things, right? Even if you just think about like the printing press, like that changed so much, like being able to actually reference things now and pass along information so much easier was huge. But so in the 16th and 17th centuries, we had Johannes Kepler, a German astronomer and mathematician who is best known for his laws of planetary motion, which helped to establish a more accurate understanding of how the planets move through the solar system. So he was a direct influence on the astrological field. He was deeply interested in astrology and did believe that the movement of the planets had a influence on humans. So he developed his own system of astrology as well, too, which he called the science of the aspects of the planets. And the system incorporates many of the traditional techniques of astrology, such as the use of horoscopes and like planetary positions, but also included some of his own personal ideas. And then the telescope was invented in the 17th century, and that was also huge for astrologers and astronomers.
Sure.
And now you have like the outer planets, right?
Yeah,
and
I was going to say, I think this is when we
added.
advanced from like the six, like the six originals or whatever. And
Yeah, there's 6 classical planets.
yes, that's the phrase. And then we started. They found out Pluto was back there, and Uranus was back there.
Neptune.
I think Uranus was the first one they discovered in the outer
Makes
planets.
sense. Closer to further, for sure.
Yeah.
But so that was obviously like a huge game changer. So in the centuries that follow, astrology continued to evolve and transform even more. In America, we had Evangeline Adams, who is the most famous astrologer from America. She basically was the first one to really like make it accessible over here. She wrote many books and gave lectures on the subject, particularly trying to popularize it as an art and like a self-help tool. So she really made it accessible here on the Western Hemisphere. And then in the 20th century, we had the computer, and then therefore right after the internet, which made it so that all of us know about astrology, basically. And we can just plug in our birth chart information now onto a website, and you have your entire chart, which would have taken like weeks of calculation probably in the past, and we can have it in less than a second. So
yeah,
fantastic.
And that's why a lot of things like cusps are being debated right now in astrology, because cusps were something that were created and conjured up before we had all this information to determine the exact placement that everything was in the sky when you were born, or when this would happen, or when that would happen. So the cusp would kind of give it that little bit of leeway of like, okay, it's a little bit of this energy, a little bit of this energy. But now that we've determined exactly where things are, it's not really like, oh, it's like half in this sign, it's half in this sign. It's either in this sign or not. And so it's like those types of discussions are starting to happen now in astrology.
When I think about cusps, though, and maybe if I learned, like, Dukes, you often reference that it's the 27th degree. And I know that I've watched other astrologers on YouTube who will reference the degree and go into the meaning of that specific degree of that sign.
Yeah.
And the specific degree can be, it's like the 4 of cups versus the 4 of wands. They both carry the weight of the 4, but they're applied differently based on the suit, right? And for me, it's very helpful for me to see that something is right at the edge of like, what do we have? What are 2 next to each other? Gemini and Aries.
Cancer.
Gemini and Cancer. So it's like right at the, so this Gemini is a little bit more like Cancerian and kind of has that influence as compared to a Gemini that's really close to Aries is before Gemini, right? Or is it Taurus? Taurus. So the difference between a Gemini that's like 1st degree Gemini, 2nd degree Gemini versus like a 28th degree Gemini. And if you know the number theory about the degrees, it's probably applied in the same way that I'm just merging the 2 signs together and kind of blending them together. And that's how I feel anyway.
Degree theory is very interesting. It's heavily debated, which is because... And unfortunately, the person who developed the degree theory just recently passed away. So I guess a lot of the questions that people have are going to just be lived on through the predecessors and the belief systems that they had. A lot of people think it's BS, but I think everything in astrology holds weight, right? Because I think that ultimately astrology is social and can evolve and change with the times, with especially now more than ever, now that we have the technology, now that we've been more connected than we ever have been. We have more data than we ever could have ever imagined regarding astrology. We could look up celebrity birth charts and use that as reference, right? And it's pretty mind-boggling that something that is so, I don't know, like contained in like the individuality of everyone's charts gets to be shared so widespread and creates this huge conversation of, I don't know, everything that astrology is willing to share and can share. But I want to know, is there any more history, Panthera?
That is what I have. So that kind of leads us to, do you guys kind of want to talk about like how astrology is used in modern day?
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of briefly talked about this.
Well,
but like,
one thing I want to bring up for sure is that birth charts are kind of more recent in popularity and
yes.
time period
because of the accessibility of them now.
Yeah, exactly. But also I'm thinking of like back in the day, people weren't worried about like self-help. People weren't like worried about like they were worried about like, okay, am I going to be able to harvest my crops this year? Is the neighboring country going to start a war with us?
Can you imagine like 1600s YouTube channels?
Flood's coming.
Top 10 tricks to keep your heels from cracking as you harvest your 8th crop season.
Literally.
That's just like that's the shift we've seen just in witchcraft in general. Witchcraft has always been about survival and like making it from day to day and making sure that your family is taken care of. And now it's much more inner focused.
Yes,
and we see that with astrology too.
Yeah, like it's. And it's very interesting because I think this also will change from astrology culture to astrology culture. We're definitely speaking with a very Western mindset, which I'm sure people, you can't help but laugh that, of course, we're talking about the individuals in a Western society rather than the whole, right? But like, it's so true. Like most of the astrology you'll find nowadays is how to better improve your life, how to be more aligned with your soul's vibration, how to blah, blah, blah. And in fact, way back in the day, birth charts was the final thing that was taught in your like astrology, like course of education. Usually the first thing you'd learn is something called horary, Horary, which is the art of, let's say Panthera lost her socks. And she comes to me and is like, Doogsley, I fucking lost my socks. And I'm like, what the heck? So I pull up a horary chart for that exact moment she asked me that. And then, okay, so socks are worn on the feet. Pisces rules the feet. All right, where's Pisces in the chart? It's in the 11th house. That's the house of friendship. Did you leave your socks at a friend's house? It's that kind of mindset and that kind of like.
Why are you taking your socks off at a friend's house?
Look, I take my socks off and really. Never mind, go on.
You have to be honest. Conversation.
Yeah, I do lose my socks fairly often, but it's because my dog steals them and he goes and buries them somewhere. We found a hole in the couch. He like tore a hole in the couch to bury it in the couch cushion. So yes, I can use help finding my socks.
Well, you know what it goes, but like, so it's usually like that kind of stuff, just like worldly things, right? So it's kind of interesting to watch the evolution of evolve with society, surely, because I mean, all of us are very concerned with us, and who knows, maybe us worrying about ourselves will help ripple out.
It's becoming
to the great
very
wide world.
novel too, I feel like.
True.
Because now you get like you do your birth chart for your business, like when you launch it, and you do your the birth chart for your pet because you can, and like you want to understand them more. So it's like before, whereas like something would be very like privileged essentially to be able to have a birth chart in the past.
Definitely.
Like you were rich enough to be able to spend or had the time and the extra energy to be able to expend to get that. Now it's like a birth chart for you.
You know, it makes me think a lot of like having pictures of yourself. Back in the day, it was very privileged to have a portrait painted by an artist that was skilled enough to capture your likeness. And now we all take 20 selfies a day.
But first, let me take a selfie.
Yeah. And like, it's very true too, now that you say that out loud. Like, it's just, this used to be something that was reserved for the richest of the rich and the most royal of the royal, and now we just get to pump these out as much and as often as we can. Free information on
the internet. Fucking rules.
Not me doing a birth chart for my seeds. I just started.
Honestly, you should. That's an awesome thing. I have a birth chart for my business. I have a birth chart for my once again, my pets. I have birth charts for special events that have pinpointed my life. There have been many days where it's like, okay, the vibes are weird. Let's check out the chart. And then, or wow, this day reminds me of this day in my past. Let's compare both of those charts, see what's similar. And that sort of mindset and that sort of knowledge. This is free, esoteric, celestial knowledge. It's beautiful. And
I did want to mention, someone asked where you get like birth charts, where you get the birth charts that have all these more niche things like Chiron and your north and south node and stuff. I know a lot of us use astro.com because it has all those different options that you can include. The default comes with Chiron and the nodes, but you can also add in like Ceres. You can add in all these different
Lilith, all
those different things. Astro.com is pretty much like the best I have found to include all of that information.
Cool.
Since we're on the topic.
I actually, I don't know if it's astro.com, but I have astro.cafeastrology.com. I like the format of this one better. And no, I don't like the format better. I actually like the format of, it's either astrocharts or alab.com, ALABE.com, have a really nice like interface and format. But Cafe Astrology, it gives me so much information. It gives you paragraphs and paragraphs that are like what the moon in the third house means, what the moon in Gemini means. And then you can take and mesh those together.
Very good for beginners.
Yeah, super good for beginners.
It walks you through how
Yes.
what everything means. But we'll go into that more, I think, once we get down to like the birth charts and then the resources.
Yeah, AstroSeek also. I can
That's
recommend
another one.
AstroSeek.
Yeah.
I like AstroSeek a lot.
We'll go ahead and just knock these out of the way because I think we're about to jump into like birth chart specifics here.
We've got one more section that we wanted to do first,
For
which
real?
was astrology myths.
Yes. Yeah,
Ooh,
debunking
yeah.
myths.
We kind of touched on that. Like, it's sort of, at least with the pop astrology of like, you're a Gemini, so you're a two-face. And like when you open up Yahoo horoscopes, I know is a big one, or the horoscopes that are on the front page of like Cosmo magazine. Although I will say that these fashion girly magazines are definitely getting more competent astrologers, because sometimes I'll read them and I'm like,
They are.
wait, this bitch actually knows what she's talking about. This is pretty good.
Yeah.
But it's very hit and miss with these like big, massive production companies. But this could be a whole other topic for a different podcast. But astrology is now becoming so trendy that these massive like corporation magazines and TV network stuff would be stupid to not start trying to capitalize on that trend. And so I think that's why we're starting to see more competent people pop up on these places. And because the people who are consuming the astrology content know, and they're going to go to the people who actually know what the hell they're talking about. As compared to just, So what kind of myths do y'all think there are?
Well, it's hard because I think that this is something that happens a lot in tarot too, and I don't want to say that this is impossible, but and I think that this is actually far more possible with astrology, which is just like predictive work, right? As we already talked about, like Nostradamus.
And what can't it predict? I feel like is kind of what we need to talk about.
That's fair, and I think that one thing that I want to make clear for sure is like, there are psychics that use these tools and can predict things. And I guess I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the average person that picks up astrology and thinks that they could determine who they're going to marry, the day that they're going to meet this person. It's usually stuff like that, right? Like the people that are, the predictions that are based out of desperation, that I don't think is fair to astrology when it's such a big, beautiful sky above us. And we're going to be focusing on this like one very small piece of this giant puzzle, right? But of course, it's hard though, because I'm not a romantic astrologer, right? I don't work with romance very often, and I'm certainly not a legal or a medical astrologer. Those exist. They do exist. They're out there and they're real. But this is like with tarot, like with anything esoteric, you got to tread carefully. You got to make sure that who you're seeking out and who you're want a reading from knows what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, because scam artists are afoot.
Yes.
Heavily on Instagram in particular.
Yeah.
Approach everything with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, even it's tough out there, and unfortunately those people give us astrologers and tarot readers a bad name, and I think that it's hard to like really pinpoint in one moment to be like, oh, this is like a real prediction, this is a false prediction, but it's just. And I mean, we could also get into the ethics of it, right? Which is very similar to the ethics of tarot, in my opinion, which is, read your chart. And there's also like the belief system that like a chart's a very sacred thing, your birth chart. It has a lot of information if put in the wrong, quote unquote, hands. So I don't know. It's hard to say like what it isn't capable of, because I think in the right hands it could be capable of so much. What did you have in mind, Panthera? Like for
So I
that
think
question?
just some of what we talked about is like when we were planning this outline was kind of, if you don't associate with one of your signs, then it's
right. Yeah.
this isn't like a cookie cutter thing. Like
No.
if you think that you don't like astrology because it's not real for you, chances are you just don't know enough about your own chart yet where it's not clicking yet. Because I will say I was a huge skeptic.
That's
And
tea.
I agree.
Y'all, I went to my land party, a bunch of dudes, right? Like who don't give a shit about astrology. But one of them started asking me questions. So I'm like, okay, like let me plug in when were you born? And we went go through, and his jaw was on the floor by the end of that. Like it's crazy. Like a lot of the times I think that we approach things skeptically, as we should, but definitely be open to the idea that that astrology can be a tool to help you, and at least open your mind a little bit to the possibility and the potential, right?
And you
Who
are
doesn't
more
want to live
than
in a
your
more
sun
magical
sign.
world? But yes, it's more than just that.
I definitely agree with that, because like I never my entire life identified as a Capricorn, as Capricorn was described to me. And a lot of that was pop astrology, but like I never identified with a Capricorn. And part of that is like I was a disorganized mess because of ADHD. Part of that is ADHD. Now I love organization, but a lot of it was more like there are these parts of Capricorn that like everyone's all like, Capricorns are like girl boss and cutthroat and everything. I'm like, but like when you redefine it as like Capricorns want to be successful, I'm like, I want to be successful at what I define as success. But that's not, I don't want to be CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. That sounds awful.
And that's the thing, is that's taking one sign, and just because I'm a Gemini doesn't mean that I'm going to be the archetype of Gemini only. And once I started understanding like my Sagittarius moon, Gemini didn't explain my like, and I don't quite want to call it a thirst for adventure, because it's more like self-sabotaging, delete everything and move to a new city and never talk to anyone from my past life again. Like that's that Sagittarian moon, I think, kicks in with that. And
that's my Sagittarius stellium. I've always wanted.
It's very like independent and go do like it. And I don't know that I would call it self-sabotage, because I imagine it would probably really expand my soul a lot. It would probably make me like very fulfilled in my life experiences. And that's the thing, is that a lot of people who are skeptical about astrology in I would say like a shitty way. I don't know how to put it, but it's not just skepticism. It's just flat out like astrology's stupid. It's not real. Like those kinds of people, they genuinely don't know what they're talking about. They have seen the astrology sign one time and are like, well, I'm a Leo, but I'm not loud in a room, so it's not. But yet they're being loud right now.
Interesting.
But it's that type of thing. And then when you look at their chart, well, that's because your Leo is opposite of this, and it's square to that. So this actually makes you end up being more introverted and quiet. Exactly. Like it's so nuanced.
It's funny for me because I grew up being like a stage 5 believer in astrology, because I very much connected to my sun sign as Gemini. And then it turns out that I'm a Gemini sun and moon. So no wonder I connected so deeply to astrology. I couldn't understand why other people were incapable of understanding. And of course, as my knowledge deepened, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, there's a lot of different layers. So it makes sense that the Leo in my life comes off more quiet, a little bit more internal, a little bit more doesn't fill up a room, like isn't the life of the party, as they all say, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess from here, do you want to start talking about birth charts?
Yeah, let's jump into birth charts.
Okay. Gosh, where do we even start with this? The birth chart itself, I guess.
We already kind of talked about what a birth chart is, right, with the history, where it is essentially a map of the stars, the constellations for a particular day and time and location for where you are born,
the longitude
right?
and latitude is very important. Yeah.
Yes.
And you are the center of the birth chart, which is like why it's in a circle.
True.
To see where the placement of like your rising is right here when you were born, whereas like the sun might have been over here when you were born, kind of.
And something I want to bring up too before I forget. So we're going to be talking about astrology today in the scope of tropical astrology. There's a lot of different types of astrology out there. There's sidereal astrology. There's people that use something called coach. There's so many different types of astrology. We're talking simply in tropical Placidus astrology today. And sidereal and Vedic astrology, which go in hand and are very adjacent to each other, are just as valid, just as regularly used. But we are going to be talking in the scope of, once again, tropical Placidus astrology. So just putting that out there for anyone who's listening. And and what that means essentially is like tropical astrology is based on where the stars were in like 0 AD, essentially. But sidereal follows the current stars in the sky. So that's why when there's like statements like, oh, the moon's in Leo, and then you go outside and you're like, no, it's not. That's why, because a lot of people use tropical. A lot of Western individuals use tropical. So I just want to make that clear. It's important to state out loud. But yeah, birth chart, big circle, big freaking pizza pie, as I call it, with 12 slices, right? Okay, like I just kind of wanted to have, for those who are watching through like YouTube or who are live here with us right now, just to kind of have like a picture of what a birth chart looks like for those who don't see it. And for those who don't see it, just know that it's a giant circle, 360 degrees, right? Which is important. Every single sign, there's 12 signs, and that is 30 degrees a sign. So that makes a circle, right? And the chart is separated into different pizza slices because we're talking about Placidus. All these pizza slices are going to be different sizes from each other because that we were just talking about latitude and longitude. That will determine how big each of the houses are in the chart. We're going to get on to that more specifically. And
for those of you guys who can't see, who are watching at home or listening, we will have links below of some resources that you can use to pull up your own birth chart if you wanted to go ahead and pause, pull up your birth chart and follow along.
Yes. And there's 12 houses, 12 signs. We got quite a few planets and celestial figures,
and
heavenly
12
bodies.
disciples, right?
Oh.
Don't get me into it. All right.
Another time.
12 inches in a foot. Numerology episode. I'm just saying, I have a lot of fun.
I think let's start with something fun. And I want us to all kind of talk about, where should we start? Well, let's start from the order of importance, which, in my opinion, the most important part of the chart are the planets. The planets are these very condensed energy vortexes that really... How do I even word this? It's this big ball of energy that has this very specific archetype. All of them do. All the signs, all the planets do. But to me, I think that the planets are just the biggest energy signature in the chart, which are then painted by which sign it is in, which is also then painted by which house it's in. So, I mean... We could talk about the planets. So, and also the luminaries, that's the sun and the moon. And this also leads me to talk about a very common phrase, which is called your big three in astrology. You're going to hear that thrown around a lot in astrology circles. And that's kind of considered what the blueprint is for the individual. Like, it's your sun, your moon, and your rising sign, your ascendant, as it's also called. And these three layers of your birth chart is just so specifically catered for you. It paints such a nice just blueprint for who you are.
It's good, well-rounded and easy to understand.
Once I find out someone's big three, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
I'm keeping my secrets from you, I see. or it's like, oh my God, I can trust you with my life. Like, as opposed to just their sun sign. That doesn't really tell me much at all. It kind of tells me a little bit, but not much. And it's also crazy because there's, sorry to interrupt you, Dukes, but there's times where like I'm like trying to guess someone's sign by looking. I've been really trying to start to get to where I guess people's signs, especially I practice a lot with celebrities, but I'm like, I wonder what they are. I think they're a Leo. And then I'll look them up and they're actually an Aquarius, but I see their whole birth chart and they have a Leo stellium. So your sun sign doesn't always determine like your front facing like presence, because there could be an overwhelming area in your chart. Like if you're looking at the chart on screen right now, what is this a sun sign in? It's a sun sign Cancer, but there's that stellium in Taurus, or the stellium in Aries. I think the Aries is the stellium. So that would like really overpower, I think, the sun sign. Anyway, back to you, Dukes.
And just real quick, since we're using the term stellium a lot, stellium is where you have 3 or more planets
or asteroids.
Three or more if the 3 includes one, either like the sun or the moon or your rising. If it includes the big 3, 4 if it doesn't include those.
Yeah, that's generally the rule of thumb I've heard. But if you have 3 of anything in a sign,
that's a lot of.
That's still a lot of energy, especially speaking as someone that has a pretty spread out chart, and then I have all of a sudden have 4 planets in Pisces.
I see a bunch of stuff clustered in one spot. I'm like, we need to focus on that for a second. Yeah,
which is why my birth chart is just like stellium in Scorpio, stellium in Sagittarius, and then sun in Capricorn with something else in Capricorn too. Everything is right there. I'm like,
Yes, it's very interesting. So I guess let's start with what we call the personal planets. These are the ones that are closest to us, that are most relevant to our upbringings and who we are. And let's start with the sun, which is, of course, the sign that everyone, what's your sign? Oh, I'm Gemini. That's your sun sign. That's the one that everyone knows.
Your basic zodiac.
And it's just, it transits every month as it changes from side to side. And the sun, this is your vitality. This is your stamina. Think about the sun. It's this big, giant light in the sky, and think about how it sits within us. It's our consciousness. It's a very basic form of our personality. And I think a big word that is often attributed to the sun too is your ego. It's this part of you that you sort of allowed to burst out of you, and it gives insight into like behaviors, choices, and so the sun's important, don't get us wrong, but maybe not always the most prominent part of your chart. For example, like for me, it helps that I'm both a Gemini sun and moon, but I'm not like a solar based person. And there's a lot of people who aren't like very solarly based, so they're not going to connect with their sun sign. However, if you're lunar like me, you're going to connect a lot more to your moon sign. With the moon so fast, transits every 2 to 3 days. By the way, the sun rules Leo. So shout out to Leos, and the moon rules Cancer. And the moon, what we often talk about in astrology, is when you first meet someone, you meet their sun sign or their ascendant. And then when you get to know someone, that's when their moon sign comes out. It's their emotions, it's their inner world, instincts, habits, and it's the unconscious, while the sun is maybe a little bit more conscious and more in control, right? The moon is that ooey gooey part of ourselves that's like really soft and shy and sensitive and vulnerable, right? And we love the moon. And the moon is used a lot in magic constantly. We did a whole moon magic episode as well, if that's something you're interested in. And we talk more in depth about the moon and her presence in day-to-day life. And it's just interesting because she moves so fast in the sky and constantly is changing signs. So she has a pretty big influence on how we feel and how we sort of dream and all the moods how moody we are every day, right? And then going outwards, we have Mercury. Mercury rules the brain, rules cognition, rules intelligence, rules communication. It rules Gemini and Virgo. And Mercury transits every 3 to 4 weeks, unless it's in retrograde. And that's worth mentioning, too. That's such a buzzword these days, Mercury retrograde, which will be happening very shortly for us currently in the podcast. It's going to be on the 21st of this month.
Curious about what retrogrades are. We have a whole episode that we did, the year ahead episode. We talk a lot about retrogrades there. So if you're not sure about what retrogrades mean, definitely refer back to that episode. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's important. I just figured I'd throw that phrase out there since that's such a common astrology phrase. Mercury retrograde. And I think that when we look at the Mercury in someone's charts, that's insight on how they think, they communicate, they learn, the way that they reason with others, how well that they enunciate and make connections with the life around them. It's very cognitive. It's very brainy. And it's also very talky. If you think about the general Gemini trope, we never shut up. And the typical Virgo trope, they never stop learning. So that's directly attached to mercurial antics, right? And then we go to Venus. We love Venus. Well, I'm speaking for myself. A bit of a slower transit, so you're going to start to see these transits start going a little slower. It changes sign every 4 to 5 weeks. It rules Taurus and Libra. And when we think about Venus, I mean, it's very on the nose. We think about attraction. We think about love. We think about aesthetic. We think about the beautiful things in life. We think about the luxurious things in life, right? We think about there's also a bit of like sociability in it as well, about like just the beautiful connections we make with others. While Mercury more so talks about how we talk to others, it's almost like how we love each other in Venus, and how we really get close and get really like intimate with someone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, did we say what transit means?
Oh, maybe not. Transit. That's a good point. Transits is how fast or slow the planet is moving in the sky. And
specifically how long it takes to get from one sign to another, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then move slower the farther away, like the farther out we get. So we've got like Mercury that zoom, 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 right? 3 or 4 weeks. And then once we get out to like Saturn, I think it takes it years to move from one sign to another.
Yeah,
and
close to 30 years.
This is how long it takes them to travel around the sun. So these far away planets are moving like wider away from the sun. So they appear to be moving slower, but they're just farther away. So think about when you see a car go by the street in front of you versus watching a car like you've got a flat plane and you can see a car moving a mile away. They seem like they're moving slower the further away that they are, right? Nobody asked for that explanation, but I gave it.
No, that's important. No, we need to know that because it does matter. A part of Mercury's magic is the fact that it moves so fast. And that's why it's so associated with short distance travel and just things that are more condensed and more quickly to navigate. That was a really crappy sentence, ironically, for Mercury. But we have fun here. So the next planet I want to talk about is Mars. And this is not a term I brought up yet, but this is our first malefic planet. And I guess in turn, I should have talked about how Venus is a benefic. There's something called malefic and benefic planets. And malefic planets tend to be just a little harder for us as humans, while benefic planets come to us very easily. And I know that some people might be like, what? Attraction, love, art, beauty doesn't come easily to me as because speaking on Venus, who's a very big benefic, but those things are pleasurable in general in life and easy to consume in general. And meanwhile, Mars, our first malefic,
and
we talk about things
super easy words to remember too, because benefic benefits you, malefic malicious, maleficent, evil, right? Like I think those are pretty good words to help you remember.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Mars deals with, and of course, there's ultimately pros and cons to each of these things, right? So Mars deals a lot with action. If you think about like Mars, you could always refer back to mythology for some of these ideals. You think about Aries, which Mars rules Aries, but I'm thinking specifically the warrior Aries in mythology. Action, competition, courage, passion. But this can also lead into aggression. This can lead into
war, right? Like
war,
conflict.
Straight up war, right?
Arguments,
conflict, absolutely. And this is insight on like how people approach their passions, how people are inspired to take action. And for example, for me, I have a very sad Mars. My Mars is not happy where it is in my chart, and
Mine's
it's very
Pisces.
hard. Oh gosh, so you get it then.
Mine's in Scorpio, which is
mine is also in Scorpio. I deal with my problems passive aggressively.
A fun fact that I think about with the Mars sign is that back in, I can't remember for the life of me if it's Greek or Roman, but the way that they used to kind of vet their military, like their soldiers, is that they were highly interested in people, especially like higher commanding officers. They really wanted people who had a Mars centered in Aries. Aries, and Aries is also the god of war. I think lines up with one of those gods too. So Mars in Aries is like a very not afraid of shit, confident, driving forward, will run into battle with no weapons when they're facing 10 swords because they're going to punch that motherfucker to death, right? They wanted that Mars and Aries energy for their high-ranking military officers, and I've always found that very interesting.
Yes, and that lines up. Like Mars is all about that very, I talk about Mars a lot as a very physical, tangible part of the chart. Also, just to put it out there, Mars also rules sex. It rules anything that you do with the body. And it's just this blood and all that stuff. This is all Mars stuff to think about, right? And then we start to go a little bit further out into our Milky Way. We start looking at some of the further planets. These next 2 planets are considered social planets. They're still considered a part of our personal planet, which we'll be getting into our inner planets, but this is a little, we're starting to get a little wider range, right? And then we start to look at Jupiter. And Jupiter transits about every year or so. So yeah, it's starting to get a little slower out there. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. And gosh, I love Jupiter. Jupiter's all about luck, expansion, optimism, abundance. It is, I always talk about it as the magnifying glass in your chart. It's this part of your chart that is, anywhere Jupiter sits, it just takes it to 100. For better or for worse, I think. But ultimately, Jupiter's a benefic. But we love to see Jupiter. Jupiter is friendly with all the planets. Gets jovial, along with everyone.
Right?
Oh yeah. And if you want to understand what your Jupiter sign is talking about, or your like wherever Jupiter is in your in your chart, it's all about looking into seeing how your luck has been in your whole life, your general outlook, how you feel happy and how you feel excited about life. And also, I find that Jupiter is really good for talking about like your big purpose. It's a very big picture planet, which is why it's so benefic, because you get to go zoom, 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 back, 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 and then things start to feel not so bad after a little bit. Meanwhile, a little bit further out, we have Saturn. And Saturn, I think, is the big scary planet for a lot of people. Definitely a malefic. Now, Saturn transits every 2 to 3 years, but it takes like 30 years to make it through an entire chart, which is what I meant earlier when I said 30. But like that's a full ass rotation. But every 2 or 3 years, you'll see Saturn change up a chart. And another very popular phrase in astrology is your Saturn return, which happens around 2 to 3 times in your life. Hopefully 3 if you're lucky. If you could live till like 90 or your late 80s and experience that many Saturn returns. And it's it's a checkpoint. It's where we check in and see, okay, how well have we adulted so far? And that's the energy of Saturn. Structure, it's restriction, it's discipline, it's responsibility, obligations. And it's honestly just a big snapshot of our reality. And I think that's why people get so, I don't know, sad and scared with Saturn, because it forces them to face whatever they've been avoiding head on. And this is a really good planet to see just how to better discipline yourself, how to better be in control of your life and everything that you're doing on a very earthly scale. and also Saturn rules time itself. So bit of a tough planet. And for those of us who have Saturn in Pisces, we're currently going through our Saturn return, which is worth mentioning. So this is going to be a big 3-year period for a lot of people wherein we are being actively confronted with, okay, how have you done so far? You know, you've just exited your 20s, or you're at the end of your 20s, and it's time to confront all the hard work you've been doing, or lack thereof. And if there is a lack thereof, then usually Saturn likes to whip people into shape. I've seen to find over the years. But now we're going to get into the outer planets. We also call these generational planets. They're less prominent in our charts because they move so slow, and they tend to affect more mundane stuff on a whole, where this is where a lot of people look at stuff that are happening like governmentally and societally, right? And in fact, a lot of astrologers, including myself, actually, we don't really look at the outer planets too much. That's how little of an influence they can have on someone's chart. Now, everyone's chart is different, and it's worth, I think, to look at them there, but you're going to see a bit of discussion between astrologers whether or not they're relevant in a birth chart, maybe, perhaps. But then we're going to get to the first outer planet, Uranus. 7-year transit, rules Aquarius. And Uranus, they're the oddball planet. They're the ones that are eccentric. They're rebellious. They're the ones that are making big changes, big waves in the world, right? So, and I would say that we would look at Uranus if we're suddenly inspired, or if we suddenly want to make a change, if we suddenly want to blow everything up and do something new. That's where Uranus is. So Uranus is out of control in the best way possible, and teaches us how to get deep outside of our comfort zone and follow our freaking heart. The next planet is Neptune, a 10 to 12-year transit. So it's at a side for a very long time. Also rules Pisces alongside Jupiter. And I think that this is the very stereotypical Pisces vibe, where this Neptune's very heady. It's very psychedelic. It's your dreams, your intuition. It's a bit delusional, where we're like, things are very intangible in Neptune, but we love Neptune. Neptune is really good for us that are trying to understand maybe, the more heady parts of life, the mysticism that follows us around in life, and especially, like I said, generationally. We can see a lot of cool generational changes as Neptune changes signs. And the final planet, which is a planet, is Pluto. I'm a
controversial.
Well,
maybe
now
a
it's
dwarf
considered
planet.
It's a dwarf planet, which it still has
Which
dwarf
is still a planet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still a planet.
Let's be honest, too. In terms of astrology, we count the sun and the moon as planets, also. So,
Yes.
That's
basically,
true. Yeah. We do talk about them as luminaries usually, but it also makes sense. They're planets. But the Pluto, so this is a 12 to 15-year transit. In fact, Pluto was only discovered recently enough that we have not lived through an entire revolution of Pluto through all the signs in our lifetime. I mean, of course, it's been going and going forever, but like within our astrological knowledge of it, knowing that it existed, it still has not done a full revolution. So this is a new planet. And Pluto rules Scorpio. And Pluto is a toughie. Pluto's definitely malefic in the grand scheme of things. Pluto talks about power, talks about death, talks about rebirth, evolution, transformation, which I think is key as sort of the phoenix of the planets. It was a planet, it wasn't a planet, it was a planet again. So that's very Plutonian things. And so Pluto really talks about positions of power. We're seeing, of course, right now in history, we're seeing Pluto discussed a lot. And in fact, we've always had power struggles in history, but since we're living it, it feels a little bit more tangible right now. And so that's Pluto.
My birth chart is really interesting with Pluto. I had someone look at it recently, and it's like Pluto and Mars are conjunct in the 1st degree of my 1st house in Scorpio. Wow. And then it hits literally every single planet, and it just got out of those 3 signs, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. It just got into Aquarius for the first time, and it is done hitting all of those planets. It has hit literally every single planet in my life aside from my moon is in Taurus. It has hit everything, and they were like, that's why your life's been so hard. It's going to get so much better now. I'm like,
and
I'll take it.
exactly is why that's why sometimes the outer planets are important to talk about. Sometimes they're super, super prominent in someone's birth charts, but that's not always the case. And like I said, I usually stick with the inner planets. That's just what I do as an astrologer. And that's the fun of astrology too. You get to kind of pick and choose. I don't really relate.
I'm definitely
I
the
feel
most comfortable with the first, like the inner Sailor Scouts, and we're not going to dig
Right.
too far into Sailor Moon, but
It was drawn on our planning notes. We have to mention it.
Sailor Moon
Yes.
is definitely very relevant to astrology because the creator of Sailor Moon definitely knew some stuff about astrology. Sailor Moon, the big crybaby that loves food, but we got Sailor Venus, the Sailor Scout of Love. Sailor Mercury was the one with her little calculator, little gadget. She's the big brain. But there's the inner Senshi, the inner Sailor Scouts, which are the first 4 planets, including the moon, for 5 total scouts. And then there's the outer scouts and the outer planets. And I'm way more comfortable with those inner ones because I find when we get to the outer planets, they start to become more abstract and harder to apply to an individual life, or they feel harder to apply to an individual life. Not that they aren't able to, but my brain is not able to wrap around it yet. And I'm still trying to get grasps on just how like something like Venus would affect your chart, right?
Yeah, and you think of like Sailor Moon, we start with the Senshi, the inner Senshi, and we
work our way out.
We don't meet the outer Senshi until way later. I mean, we meet Neptune and Uranus like fairly early on, but we don't start with them. And so like even in Sailor Moon, they, not to say they're not impactful, but we could do a whole Sailor Moon.
We literally, I think we're going to do a Sailor Moon episode.
But it just like reflects that they're not as impactful to our personal life as the inner scouts that are there from the very beginning.
They're still impactful. It's just that it's more abstract and harder to interpret for, especially for a beginner. I think that working with the first 4 or 5, and really like the big 3, like if you're brand new to astrology, I would recommend to get very comfortable with your sun sign, of course, but also start to dig into your rising and your moon sign. And this brings us to a great question. What does someone do? Because the rising sign is only found if you have your birth time, the exact time that you were born. And so if you don't have
the moon sign too can change depending on that.
Yes,
too.
it can. So if you don't have your birth time, Doogsley, what do you say to someone who's like, I don't have my birth time, I won't be able to have my big 3?
So there's 2 things you could do if you don't have your birth time. One, you could call the hospital you were born at. There are hospitals that literally have all that data, and it's worth a try. I've heard it happen more commonly than not. They could deliver it for you. Or the other thing, there's something called rectification charts, which you will need to find an astrologer for. And you will probably have to pay dollary dues to get that. It's hard work because what they do is that you basically tell them your life story, and they will rectify your chart and tell you, okay, according to everything you've said to me, sounds like you're a Pisces rising, and here's why. So it will, you have to find someone that you trust, someone that you can rely on astrologically, but it's totally possible. Like, there are people that do this for a living to help rectify charts. So there are options out there to discover that. But seriously, if you don't have your birth time, also you can always just...
There's like things that I typically recommend is like call your parents up. I know that might not be an option for everyone for a variety of life circumstance reasons, but your one of your parents will likely have the birth time, or you can dig into hospital records or like city records. So you'll want to find the county of the person or the county of the place that you were born in, and see if you can get into the county records which it's public information. So it's not like but you have to go out to the courthouses and start to seek that information out, contact the hospital you were born at. So if you're really determined to get that information, it's public record. The hospital recorded when and where you were born. You know what I mean? It's available somewhere, but you're going to have to do work to get it.
Yeah. And definitely harass your parents and try to find your birth certificate. And also don't trust your parents say so many situations where people are like, oh, my parents have been saying 10:30 a.m. I get my birth certificate and it's like 12:45. And that changes your whole chart. You know what I mean? So definitely try to find that birth certificate. If not, try to find the hospital or the city records. If not that, then it sounds like you're going to have to find a chart rectifier.
For example, my mom told me I was born at 254, which makes me an Aries rising, but it was actually 241, which is a 13-minute difference, which makes me a Pisces rising. So sometimes the 13 minutes can make the difference. And if it's 2 hours off, a lot of stuff could be shifting around in your chart. So the birth time is very important.
Yeah. So, and it's very hard to do rectifications. So it's, if all else is lost, it's definitely worth finding an astrologer that can help you with that. There's a lot that can. It's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the other
astrology.
things in your birth chart won't be so heavily dependent on time. I mean, there are exceptions, like if the moon changes signs in the middle of the day, or like something changes signs in the middle of the day. But those are less common than your rising changing signs. Rising changes signs every 2 to 3 hours. But the other thing is you can still find out most of your other stuff in your birth chart. You just won't know your rising if you don't know your exact time. And other things may change. Like look up the moon on the day you were born. It might have changed signs. But that is less common. So you can still find out more stuff about your birth chart even without knowing your rising.
Yeah. Like there's still a lot of things that you can learn without your birth time, but honestly, it's so get your birth time.
It's a big part. I mean, it's called the big three for a reason.
Oh yeah, and I didn't even talk about the final of the big three, which is the ascendant, which in my opinion is the most important part of the chart, and I will explain why. Because the ascendant or the rising sign, it is always in your first house. It almost like it is the first house, right? It's all about you. It influences everything you do subconsciously. It influences the way you dress, the way you like to, even like down to the type of fabrics you like to wear. It talks about like how you directly interact with the world. A lot of times people talk about the first house / the ascendant as the helm of the ship. It is this. It's where you steer. It's where you go. It's how you direct yourself through life. It is how enthusiastic you are about the journey. It's how hesitant you are about the journey. It's this. It is not intentionally projected outward. It is just this natural aura that oozes out of you. That is your ascendant. It is the way that we confront the world. It's the way that we confront ourselves. It's the way that we materialize and show up. It's all of these beautiful subconscious things that all of us embody, and that's oftentimes oftentimes when I guess someone's sign, I don't guess their sun sign. I guess their rising. It's just it's who they are, like capital A. It's who they are. And
I would say like the ascendant or the rising sign is usually like your first impression that you have of someone. Like whenever you meet someone and you walk away in that energy signature that you're kind of digesting from them, that's usually from their rising sign, or it can be depending, of course, on their chart. It's all nuanced.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So if you're wondering what the rising sign is, it's the sign that is on the horizon at the moment of your birth. That is what is peeking over the horizon, the first thing that is like in theory seen when you're born. And so because of that, it's like your first impressions on people, the first things that people see about you.
Absolutely. The rising is a deeply, deeply important part of the chart. We'll get a little more into that when we get into the houses, but let's speed through the signs. Okay, so we talked about all these planets. We talked about all of the energy signatures. And I do want to say that on our full moon episodes, we do talk about each of these signs in more detail. If you look up the full moon episode with its corresponding sign, there's always like a 20-minute segment at the beginning where we all just sort of chat about our experiences with that sign. Why, like, other than this blurb I'm just gonna throw out with each sign, where we have deeper discussions.
Do the quick little round table game?
Sure. We could do that, but like, let's keep it to one word for each of the signs. Okay.
So each of us say one word that we relate to the signs.
So let's start with Aries. Aries is the first sign. It's fire, element, and that's important too. All of these signs have different elements, and if you know anything about tarot, you're going to be able to piece those together as well. Fire, so we're talking like big, like passionate, dynamic energy. It's a cardinal sign, which denotes the start of a season, so it's this big initiatory energy, and it's ruled by Mars. That's Aries, and I think the word I use for Aries is that they're very assertive.
I would say cocky.
Whoa.
Energetic.
Passionate.
I think all 4 of those together make a nice painting.
I think so too.
I think this will be fun.
Yes. Aries, I say this every time and I'll say it again. Aries, you scare the fuck out of me, but I love you.
Yeah.
I'm glad we need your chaos in this lifetime for sure. Taurus is the next sign. So that's an earth sign. Earth things deal with a groundedness in life, a very tangible part of life, just like the earth is for us, right? It's a fixed sign, so we're halfway through the season, and so things are very consistent, very focused, and it's ruled by Venus. And the word I'd use for Taurus is they're very based in stability and comfort. That's 2 words.
Picky.
Constructive.
Stubborn.
Classic.
I was gonna go with cozy, but
Cozy. I feel like cozy and comfortable should be in there, but I chose picky not as a bad thing, but I'm thinking, and I know we're not
They're
supposed
particular.
particular. Very, it's hard to get into their inner circle. They're very very
That's
choosy.
their Venus.
Yeah.
yeah.
They want it to look and feel a very specific way, for sure. I agree with that. The next one is Gemini. We got 2 Geminis up in front and center here, me and Ty. And we also got a little bit of Gemini energy from Panthera as well.
Gemini rising. Yeah.
Woohoo! So Gemini is an air sign. So once again, we're getting into that cognition area. It's the intangible. It's how we think, how we feel, how we communicate. It's mutable. So we end a season on this level, and mutable signs are all about, they're adaptable, right? All the mutable signs are. They're very adaptable. They're able to sort of bounce back easily. And ruled by Mercury, which we talked all about. And the one word I use for Gemini is curious.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah, master of none.
Flowing.
I'd say sociable.
Yes, probably one of the most social signs for sure. The next one is Cancer, and this is our first water sign. Water signs, once again, we're getting to the ooey gooey. This is very intuitive, emotional, sensitive individuals, right? And then we're back at Cardinal sign, and it's ruled by the moon. And the word that I use for Cancer is nurturing.
I feel like I'm saying a lot of negative ones, but temperamental.
Protective.
Emotional.
Oh God,
In
the
all
crybaby.
context, good and bad.
The crybaby of the zodiac for sure, and also
mommy energy.
don't even get me started with that. You have no idea how right you are with that. So
The
next
crab
side is
with the big
Leo.
mommy milkers.
Oh God!
Oh my God.
Say it ain't so. It's true. That rules the chest. So it rules the heart. So next up is Leo, fire sign, a fixed sign, ruled by the sun. A word I use for Leo is magnetic.
Flamboyant.
Ooh, that's a good one. Performer.
I was gonna say theatrical, which I'm like dramatic, but like not dramatic in the negative
Right.
sense.
They're charismatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is. That's the word I'd use for Leo too. They're outgoing, you know. Next word. The next sign is Virgo. So this is an earth sign, mutable sign in Mercury, ruled by Mercury. And Virgo, they're analytical.
I would say
They're the analytical side of Mercury.
secretive or introverted, like to themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say particular.
Efficient.
They are very efficient, aren't they?
It doesn't mean they're not sociable, but just that they process it a lot inside
care.
before they start to.
Yeah, they're ruled by Mercury, so they're eventually going to talk about it, but they need to process it up here first. Next side is Libra. So That's Panthera. and yes, Fuchsia, the Libra rising. So we got, that's an air sign, cardinal sign, ruled by Venus. Diplomatic.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Superficial.
Maybe, okay, I'll roast myself. Judgmental.
I'm roasting us too. Indecisive, and I hate it.
I think, and I want to just say one thing about all that, because with Libra, they're all about harmony, right? So, like, of course they're going to spread judgment because they want to make sure, once again, ruled by Venus, they want to make sure that their space is as harmonious as possible.
They're also kind of people pleasers too, though. So, and that's not a bad thing, but in a way that they kind of help keep the peace, and it's comfortable to be around Libra usually, as long as they don't judge. They haven't judged you worthy of not being treated nicely.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. The next sign is Scorpio. It's a water sign, a fixed sign ruled by Mars. Scorpio. I'm going to skip this one. Someone else go first.
Intuitive.
I have to think about it.
I was going to say, I always just, that's hard to do this in one word, but like deep, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah,
like they're all about those deep emotions. Yeah.
I'm gonna say moody. Saying as a Scorpio stellium.
I'll say perceptive.
Yeah.
I think that they are big watchers. They watch from their little scorpion covering their walls, and they, I don't know.
I always hear the signs talked about how they participate in like a party setting. Like if there's 100 people in a room and a Scorpio is going to be back along the wall in the corner and it's going to make its way across the room in the least noticed way possible. Unless they want to be noticed. That's the difference. That like they can be very Leonine flamboyant as well, but typically speaking, they are like in the little corner,
the watches on the wall,
scuttling
They're
around.
The goths.
They're super gothy. Yeah. Legit Wednesday, like the Wednesday portrayal. I don't think she's like canon a Scorpio, but she's very good. Like I think Scorpio portrayal in her.
Yeah. The next sign is Sagittarius. This is a fire sign, a mutable sign ruled by Jupiter. I would use the word adventurous for the Sagittarius.
You don't own me.
Yeah.
I have to always think about my sister for Sagittarius, and almost like narcissistic, but like in a I'm going to tell you my story and you have to listen way.
Whoa.
They're the main character energy.
Not my Sag moon. Hold on.
Wait.
Well, Libra are superficial and no, I'm kidding.
No.
Drama.
Sagittarius are fiercely independent.
Oh yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
know?
For better or worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes both at once.
True. That's scary. The next sign is Capricorn. Earth sign, a cardinal sign, ruled by Saturn. Capricorns are I think so. There's two sides of Saturn, right? Where it's like this very disciplined part, but then there's also this very like, I don't know, like reformative part of Saturn. And I think Capricorn rules that like disciplined part of Saturn.
Calculated.
Organized.
What's the word for this? I guess longevity.
I would also want to say
Ooh,
worldly.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's that. Now that is a word I'd use for the next sign, which is Aquarius.
I feel like
but also ruled by
Capricorn
Saturn.
likes to brag about how worldly they are. They like to be so cultured and like they have so
Not
much.
me always talking about going to New Zealand and Scotland.
That's so funny.
That's one time I went.
The next one is Aquarius, air sign, fixed sign, ruled by Saturn and Uranus. And yeah, worldly is a good one, but they're humanity. They are the human of the chart.
Quirky.
Empathetic.
Wait, what did you say?
I said empathetic.
I thought you said pathetic.
I thought she said prophetic. I was like, wait, really? I'm going to say misunderstood and loving it.
Yeah,
True.
and I'll just take 1 second. I really want to expand on this because we did get a question earlier talking about how Aquarius is probably the most misunderstood sign, because I think that a lot of people associate them with being the alien of the signs, but I think that's why they're the most human. They are the most themselves, whatever that means. So they're the most likely to show up and just let their freak flag fly. You know what I mean? So, shout to Aquarians. You guys rule. And finally, our final sign, and what rules my chart, Pisces. Water sign, mutable sign, ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. And the word I would use is mystical.
A fan fiction writer. Visionary. Imaginative. Daydreamer.
I have a good one and I have a bad one.
Okay, I'm ready.
Good one, dreamy.
You
Bad
took
one,
mine.
lazy. A little bit.
Oh, bruh.
But it's because stuck in like the dreamy, like
Yeah, what the heck? I'm perfectly happy floating. I don't see the problem here.
Yeah, I was gonna say dreamy, often like lost, head in the clouds, kind of.
Yeah,
And also just dreams. I mean, we talked about Pisces energy a lot in our dream episode.
We're prone to escape. What can we say? But those are the signs. And of course, once again, this is very, very basic. This is, we had some pop words in there, but if you want to hear more focused discussions on the signs, please check out the beginnings of our full moon episodes. We have full-blown discussions on what these signs mean, what they mean to us, and they're a lot more in depth.
And if y'all are interested enough, let us know in the comments on YouTube or in the Discord server or wherever. But we could do, like, we're kind of thinking about making an episode that's like roasting the signs, where we just kind of go in on all of them.
Yeah.
Or we could do mini episodes focused on each sign. Let us know what sounds good to you, what you're thinking.
Or, like,
we're all ears.
Yes.
Or even if we do like
Bro
an
is all
episode on
yours.
the earth signs and an episode on water signs, we're flexible.
And
we might say we're mutable.
Oh,
Real
it
shit?
can't be a good roasting. We got moon rushing in the chat. That's like, as long as there's a good roasting. No, you're going to roast the signs, and you go.
we're gonna cut.
You
deep.
dig them.
Get
You dig them
ready.
at grave and you bury them.
If you're that sign and you show up and listen to the episode and you don't leave like a little angry, but also a little like scene, or we didn't hit our goal.
Exactly.
I did want to mention one thing, and I was starting to type this out as a response, and I was like, this is getting long. Someone mentioned that they tend to look at the bright side of each sign or at the positive traits, which is fine. But I actually, like, even though we named a lot of things and we joked about roasting, like, mostly ourselves, with these, like, quote, negative traits, I don't see them as positive or negative traits, because what can be positive in one light, like dreamy, great, you are full of ideas, can be negative in another way.
And that
dreamy, you don't get shit done.
You don't actually act upon any of the ideas. Yeah,
like,
and that's
as a Taurus, I'm stubborn, Taurus moon, like stubborn. But that means I stick with shit until I get
loyal.
it done.
Yeah, the opposite side of stubborn is loyal. Exactly.
Right. And it's sort of the same thing as we were talking about before with benefic and malefic, where if a Venus is in a chart, that doesn't mean, well, Venus is in every chart, but if Venus is relevant in your chart, that doesn't mean that you're like this open flowing goddess of, like, it can also mean that you're very picky. It can also come up as you're too focused on aesthetics. You're very superficial, you know, like there's positives and negatives to to everything in the chart. And it's worth mentioning that, like, and as you can see, none of us here were like, fuck Scorpios, like all Scorpios, like, you know, like, because that's the thing too, like there's some people that swear off of certain signs with friendships.
Yeah, but that just sounds like you got cheated on by a Scorpio once, and now you hate all
exactly.
Scorpios. Okay,
Right.
boring.
I mean, don't ask me about Taurus.
Cancer men. So it's fair, but like, yeah, like it's very wide ranging, and once again, very basic. And there's one last thing I want to talk about a birth chart. I'm going to go through this really fast. Okay? It's the houses. We got to talk about the houses. So we got the planets, big bursts of energy. They live in the signs. So for example, let's say that you got like Venus in Pisces, right? And so that'll give your Venus your sense of aesthetic, your sense of the way you love, the way you take care of yourself, in with this Pisces feel. So maybe the way you love yourself is a little bit out of touch. Maybe it's harder for you to get in touch with your physical form since Pisces is so out there, right? And maybe you're into really soft pastels and watery features because it's a water sign, right? But then you find out that Venus in Pisces is in your 6th house, the house of work and the house of health. So maybe it actively heals you to take care of yourself, to take care of your body, right? And so that's why the houses matter. The houses is where everything lives. And so I'm going to go through the houses real quick. There's 12 houses, 12 pizza slices, okay? So the first house houses your ascendant. It is yourself. It's your identity. It's your personality. It's how you show up in life. Poggers. The next house is the 2nd house. It supports the 1st house, raises the roof, and it takes care of you from underneath. And a lot of times, the 2nd house is the house of money. It's a house of material worth. It's a very tangible house. It's your possessions. The 3rd house, following up, is the house of communication. It's the house of short but exciting vacations. It's the house of siblings, of logic, of knowledge. The next house is the 4th house. Right at the bottom of your chart, it's your roots. It's your family. It's your home. It's your security. It's how you feel safe, how you feel supported. 5th house. It's the house of fun. It's the house of creativity. It's the house of love. It's pleasure. It's also the house of children and childbearing things, right? The 6th house is the house of work. It is your 9 to 5. It's also your health. It's how you show up every day. It's your habits. The 7th house is the house of long-term relationships and unions. So this can mean your partner, your life partner. This can be your besties. This is a place of long-term business relationships. And it's the opposite of your 1st house. So that 1st house is you. The 7th house is the other, and specifically the dream other, how you would want the other to look like, right? The 8th house. Now this is where we're getting a little esoteric. The 8th house is the
Pascal.
house.
That's my answer. That was a question, right? What our dream mother? No? Oh, my bad.
You were like a full 2 minutes delayed.
No, that was like 5 seconds.
We were like a full house past.
She just said dream mother like 5 seconds ago. I will clip it out of the editing process and send this to you.
I feel like we were already like on to the next one, and then it was like Pedro Pascal, and I was like, wait, what?
It's because my button was muted. I had the mute button. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I'm sorry. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. Did I need to respond 2 seconds earlier to
Spend more time.
I'm about to chop this out of editing.
I hope your Pedro Pascal comment was worth the editing you're going to have to do.
That is just added on my editing process. So yeah, I think it was.
It's going to be a great reel.
So then we go from there to the 8th house, which is the house of transformation, of psychology. This is where we give things to others. A lot of people say this is death and taxes and sex. It's almost like this private parts of ourselves that we give to others. It's an interesting space.
Not the taxes. No.
Yeah,
Death and Texas. That's my moon. My moon is death and Texas.
The 9th house is the house of travel, of expanding ourselves, of spirituality, religion, learning new languages, higher education. It's how we depthen our world and create more space for ourselves to continue to grow and learn and process life. The 10th house is the spotlight of our chart, right at the tippy top. And it's exactly that. It's how we are socially out there. It's similar to the ascendant, but as opposed to the ascendant, which is a very subconscious being, the 10th house is how you perform. It's also where your profession lies and your just outward facing self. The 11th house is the house of community and friends. So while your besties are in the 7th house, your peers and your like-minded individuals that you spend time with, that's your 11th house. And I also find that the 11th house, I've been working with the 11th house a lot lately for dreams. It is just such a cool place to work with when it comes to, thinking about the big things in life you want to achieve. It's a very positive and light house. And then we land on the 12th house, which is right above the 1st house. So think about what's above us, what's a little bit out of reach. This is the inner self. This is our solitude. This is our self-reflection, our karmic stuff. It's a very dark house. It's a shadowed house, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, maybe a bit out of reach for most individuals. Those are the houses. And with all those things combined, our planets, our signs, and our houses, that creates this chart. And that creates this stage that we get to play on and that we get to have fun in. And that helps sort of give us meaning and give us depth to the way we live our lives, the way that our personality jumps out, the way that we compromise, and the way that we make decisions. It gives us it paints a nice picture for us where, and like I said, it's in order. Planets are important, then the signs, then the houses, and then after that are the aspects, which we're not even touching yet, which is how planets interact with each other in the chart. And it creates this amazing dance in the stars that reflect who we are and reflect what we're doing.
A brief run through of just the square, trine, sextile,
sure.
Just really quick.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Me. So let's start with conjunct. Conjunct means that they're right on top of each other. That's neither a good or a bad aspect. It is what it is. So that means it could be good. It could be bad. Think about, imagine if Mars and Saturn were working together. Whew, that is a hardworking, exhausting placement for me to think about. But on the other hand, if we think about the moon and Venus working together, oh gosh, that's so dreamy and soft and what a nice place. That just makes me happy thinking about it. The next one is opposite and opposition. So on the exact opposite of conjunction, that means that one planet is here and one is all the way exactly opposite on the other side of the chart. And once again, not exactly positive or negative, but it ends up being sort of a seesaw effect, right? Where maybe one will have more of a precedence over the other, depending upon many astrological things, right? And things that you go through in your life. Next is trines. Trines are very harmonious. If you think about a triangle, you can make a trine between each of the elements. So a water to water and a water to water will happen. And trines are very easy, free flowing. It creates a lot of space for you to really work with those planets, and it's very receptive to each other. On the other hand, there's something called squares. Squares are yucky. Blech. We don't like squares.
Ew.
Squares are tough.
What a bunch of losers. An L7 loser.
Ew. Cringe. Yeah, squares are tough. Squares create a lot of tension in the chart. And I've met many people with lots of squares in their chart, and they feel like they just can't get their shit together. There's constantly tension. There's constantly roadblocks. There's constantly this. There's constantly that. That's the energy of squares. And there's also sextiles, which are like baby trines. Once again, very free-flowing energy, but maybe like just a step lower when trines are like, oh, hallelujah. The sextiles are maybe just a little less prominent, but worth looking at. And is there anything else? I think those are the big ones. Those are the big aspects.
You did sextile, right?
Yeah, I just said sextile. Yeah, those are the big ones, right? And there's so many other types of aspects. It's hard. There's inconjunct, there's parallel, but those are the big ones. Those are the ones that you want to focus on and if you're just getting into astrology, you'll want to look into your big three and start to see how they relate to other parts of your chart. So understanding these major ones like the conjunct, opposite, square, sextile, and trine, these are going to help you start to understand the relationships the planets have with each other in your particular birth chart. And then applying those to the houses and seeing where that's taken. So you have a square in the 7th house that's happening to the would it have to be 3 away, right? To whatever. I don't know charts well enough, but like square to the 4th house or something. And now you're starting to see that these two areas of your life are warring with each other with the influence of this planet in this sign. Exactly.
And then it all starts to create this picture. And this is why it's not as simple as I'm a Gemini and this explains my entire life, right?
Right, exactly. You said that perfectly. And that's your chart. That's a chart. I mean, it's birth charts, but there's so many different types of birth charts out there. So, but that's the basics, really, to what the hell is going on this giant confusing circle with lines going through it. And it's you. It's a snapshot of who you are, your soul, your meaning, who you are underneath all the nonsense, right? And that's what astrology is all about. It's all about gaining extra amounts of sentience to the world gone mad, trying to give us a better sense of reasoning. There's also other parts of the chart, such as the North and South Node, which can start to talk about things like your meaning, the reason why you're here, what you're meant to conquer in this lifetime. There's things like Chiron that talks about your unhealable wounds and how to better like just traverse through life knowing that there's going to be the sore spot that you're constantly dealing with over and over and over. Sorry. And like, it's just,
that felt personal.
There's so many layers. It was personal. It was
Chiron is very personal.
Yeah. And there's also parts like Lilith. There's you look into asteroids. There's so much to look at, but this is only just the beginning. And we are,
I mean, this is 101.
We are willing to listen to anyone that, hey, wow, that sounded interesting. Let us know. We will love to talk about more on these things in the future. Seriously. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's Doogsley's Birth Chart 101 and the Astrology 101 episode, and we are very well over time. So Fuchsia has some resources that she's going to deliver to us in a very quick manner.
Yeah, I'm not going to take forever on these, but I have a bunch of things if you're interested in learning more, especially regarding your birth chart. Is the starting point for a lot of people. I have some books, I have some apps, websites, lots of things. So, number one, this book called Astrology for Yourself. It is amazing.
I have a copy too, but it's not with me.
Oh, you didn't prepare.
No, I did. It's over there. It's right there.
So basically, you go through and you write down your actual chart and how it pertains to you. It is a workbook. And it's like, it has these different, like, your sun sign, it'll say the positive, or I think they call it helpful and unhelpful traits.
That's very nice.
Yeah, it's. I like that they're not like negative and positive. But it's like, my sun sign is element. Element is earth. 2 keywords for this element are grounded and reliable, and I took them from the chart that was in there. That what applies to me. So you can go through this entire workbook with your birth chart and really understand how your birth chart applies to you with what is in it. It is fabulous, and then you can once you've gone through it with yourself, you can go through it with any other birth chart. But you know yourself the best. So it's a good starting point.
And if there's any one book that I can recommend to beginners, it's that book. That is the book to start with if you want to get into astrology, want to understand your birth chart, want to understand what all of this means on a personal level. That is the book I recommend. 1,000,000%.
The other book is pretty intimidating, but it's the only astrology book you'll ever need, and it is big. It is thickums. The title is not incorrect, but it is intimidating. So that's why I recommend starting with Astrology for Yourself. But this has a lot of stuff in it, and I recommend this one too. So those are like the 2 beginner books that I recommend. I have some other books that I didn't pick up this year's, but I like to pick up Llewellyn's Astrological Pocket Planner for every year. It just has literally every transit what's happening when throughout the year. It's great. This is 2022, so don't screenshot it and use it for right now, because you're not going to get any useful information. And then we didn't get into these, but I wanted to mention these because we don't hear a lot of talk about these parts of the birth chart in astrology. But if you're curious about learning about particularly the lunar nodes, the North and South Node, there is this fabulous book called Lunar Nodes by Wendell Perry. And this book, A Lantern in the Dark by Daniel Blackwood, deals with the major crossroads, like the Saturn return, midlife crisis kind of things that everyone kind of experiences around the same age. So we talk a lot about the Saturn return, especially since Doogsley and Panthera just entered theirs, and I know a lot of the listeners entered their Saturn returns very recently. So that is a great book for picking up if you're interested in learning more about those specific parts of your birth chart. As for you also had a book to recommend called On the Heavenly Spheres.
Yep, that's another great beginner astrology book written by an amazing astrologer. So look up On the Heavenly Spheres as well. That's a really, really good beginner book.
And then I have a couple miscellaneous physical resources. I love this. It's called Heavenly Bodies. It's like tarot cards, but it's astrology, but it's more, you can use them as flashcards, like Mars, move forward and defend self. And it just like has the little keywords, and then it has a full book about all of the stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's also there's astrology, they're called astrology learning cards that are actual literal flashcards, and they have like everything. They have the aspects, they have the like yin and yang, and what these what like a square means, and like actual physical flashcards. I don't have those on hand, but they're great. And then as for if you want to check out more podcasts or videos, I recommend Astrology of the Week Ahead with Chani Nicholas is amazing. I listen to it every week. We go over the full moon astrology, but she does every single week. This is what's happening in the sky. This is the transits. This is just general knowledge, and it's like 20 minutes, 25 minutes every week, and it's just like kind of like a really good thorough heads up of the transits for that week. And I've learned a lot about transits from listening to that. She also has an app, the Chani app, that is pretty thorough too.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that.
And then the YouTube channel, if a lot of you like tarot, the YouTube channel Tarot Oracle has an entire series on the astrology of tarot. So I learned a lot about just like I used this when I was still learning tarot in the early stages, and just learning tarot and astrology in tandem. And it just gave a lot more context to the tarot cards, but also gave a lot more context to astrology, because now I can be like, oh, Mars is Emperor energy and stuff like that. So I hope I got that right.
We will, yes. We will be doing a tarot astrology episode. It is deeply necessary.
And also the astrology podcast Doogsley was recommending.
God, yes. Everyone should, if any of this you want to learn more, and you want to learn more, like a lot more, you should check out the astrology podcast with Chris Brennan, one of the most brilliant astrologers of this lifetime. And seriously, you will learn so much from the astrology podcast. Sometimes it's a little heavy-handed, maybe not super beginner-friendly, but there are a lot of beginner resources like strewn throughout the episodes. So check them out. Super informative, like mind-blowing. So super good. I can't recommend the astrology podcast enough.
Yeah. And then because we're all on the internet and on our phones, a few apps and websites just to mention. We mentioned like Cafe Astrology, Astro.com, AstroSeek. Those are great for like seeing your birth chart and more information. Luna Astrology is really good, but it's a subscription based.
I use that.
Really good. Tons and tons of information. And then 3 apps I really like are Sanctuary, Horos, and Time Passages. So Time Passages is like great for actually like getting information on the transits and how they're applying to your birth chart specifically. Sanctuary is very horoscope based, but it also has information on your birth chart, and like this planet is in this house and everything. And so does Horos. So I use Horos when I'm like when my friends are like, tell me about my birth chart, I'll just pull it up on my phone. So those are 3 apps that I use a lot.
Cool.
That's it.
Okay.
Yay.
I'll put all those links in the description for the episode.
We're going to have quite a meaty description section for y'all. So y'all can get the links in a more easy format on the website at celestialcafe.org. If you scroll down, there's a link that says view the podcast archive. That'll get you to the blog post for it, which just kind of is our little show notes. Those are also included on the YouTube description, and you're welcome to ask questions in the Discord server. All of that's at celestialcafe.org. And thank you again, everyone, so much for the support on the podcast. It's been amazing. If you'd like to support us more, consider subscribing to our Patreon and joining our little community over there. We've got some fun stuff we're going to hopefully roll out for y'all in the next couple of months. And yeah, so thank you to the hosts for bringing all your wonderful information and having such a info-packed episode. And wish me luck with the editing process. I'm keeping the Pedro Pascal comment. And
maybe not the whole debate about that.
I don't know. It's kind of fun. But thank you everyone in the Twitch chat for joining us for the live recording of this. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode, which is about ...
Oh, I think that's me. Wait, I think that's me and Panthera. I think we're talking about Faye.
Faye! Yes!
So the next episode is a mini episode with Panthera and Doogsley, and they'll be chatting all about Faye.
Just in time for Beltane. So get ready, get your milk out.
True, our honey milk.
And honey.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yes, very true.
All right.
And real quick before we go, but
sure.
You guys should definitely buy Doogsley's astrology readings available on Fazy.love. Fantastic.
She
if you're
a whole
interested in
little
learning more about
dive.
your birth chart, Doogsley's got you covered. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. I have both a beginner astrology reading for people who are feeling maybe a little overwhelmed and don't know where to begin. We talk about your big three. We talk about your houses. We talk about your chart ruler. Something we didn't even get to today. We can talk about all those things in there. I also have a full ass just natal chart reading. And I also have another reading that talks all about your moon sign, how to best nurture your moon sign. So I have quite a few astrology readings available on Fazy.love, FAEZI.love. And I hope to see you there. I would love to read your chart and wax poetic about your stars with you. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll see you on the next episode of Celestial Cafe, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of April. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Holy moly.
That was a doozy.
That was a doozy.